Good morning, everyone. Nice to be here. Tyrone Moodley, previously with GoFund Startup, added a new portfolio to a company called YasMoney.io, an African fintech for the African diaspora, and looking forward to moderating.
Hi, I'm Richard Winter. I have a company named Winter Corp. We're data architects. We help customers with the skyscrapers of the world of data and analytics, the largest data warehouses and data lakes.
And my name is Shikha Shrivastava, and I work at IBM. I work in this exact field where we are working, driving the initiative in IBM to get our SaaS, our products in IBM, run as SaaS in multiple clouds for several reasons. But that's what we are working on to do. And I'm driving that initiative.
So I guess we'll get into it. And Richard, I will ask you this question. Why do customers end up with a multi-cloud environment?
In my experience, they do it by accident. And I think back to the early part of my career when databases were new, and I'd go to when I meet an executive, I'd say, "What database does your company use?" And the answer gradually got to be, in a big company, we use everything. We have every database, and I think in most big companies now, they have every cloud. It may not be because they wanted to, but throughout their business, people are signing up for cloud-based services. They often don't even know what cloud they're in. And they end up with systems and data in every major cloud. This is my opinion.
I can add to it. You're absolutely right, Richard. It's by accident. But if you think about how customers starts, they start with cloud because of elasticity. And then they want to do innovation because it's easier. You don't have to set up hardware. You don't have to set up any resources, so you can innovate faster. And then they get into where I can innovate faster. You can innovate faster wherever you get discounts better. So once you start looking at the discounts and figuring out which cloud is easier to innovate on, clouds are competing with each other. They'll give you different discounts. And it's always pursuing that path to innovate faster leads them to multiple accounts. And within IBM, I can tell you, we end up with multiple clouds because of acquisitions. Every company is acquiring other company, and they are in different clouds. That's another reason people, which is to your point, it's accident. Both are leading to accidents. Then there are some intentional as well. Yeah. Some people do intentionally go multi-cloud. There's a lot of thinking behind, especially on the European side, where you should not tie up to one cloud. So no vendor lock-in. You don't want to be held by one cloud. So you should have a failover strategy to another cloud. So those are some of the reasons, in my mind, companies get into multi-cloud.
And what challenges do you see customers facing with multi-cloud environments?
Well, for me, it's that the data becomes distributed over multiple clouds and becomes fragmented. And often insight and opportunity comes from bringing different types of data together and integrating it for business insight. So when your data is in multiple clouds and also on-prem, then you have the challenge of how do you do that? How do you access it? How do you know what you have? How do you bring it together when you need to? How do you analyze it? How do you keep it up to date? You have all those challenges.
I work in multi-cloud environment. There's several challenges. One is definitely what Richard mentioned. If you remember, earlier it used to be solution engineering. Now it's data engineering to figure out how to best have data at the right place, closer to where it should be and such. The challenges are, there are several challenges. First of all, every cloud is unique. To think about, I can run in every cloud in an economical way, in a standardized way, is challenging. So no two clouds have same set of APIs to provision storage, to provision networking, to provision VPCs. The APIs all are different. So you can get expert in one cloud, and then you'll be catching up with the next cloud. Then containers are a way where portability comes into play, and that's one one can rely on getting some portability across. But APIs are different. Once the APIs are different, the way to manage the elasticity, performance, scale, that's different across. Then making sure your data is handled correctly across is challenging. Once you've figured out functional stuff, the one that gets very important is your privacy, GDPR, if you've heard of that, privacy, compliance, security. Your system is not getting hacked. Your data is handled correctly. There's no breach of data privacy. All of that gets quite challenging, quite exhaustive, as well as involved to make sure that you're managing that correctly across clouds and hybrid as well. Those are several challenges that we face as we work towards it to make sure your system is secure and system is responsive across clouds.
So you mentioned containers, and automatically made me think of Docker.
Yeah.
So with IBM, and you mentioned APIs are different and networking is different. If I had a Docker container on Azure, would I be able to utilize that on an IBM network without having to change much?
So in IBM, we have a multi-cloud story. We are running our SaaS closer to the clients where the clients are. So today, when customers, so having researched all of this stuff, client decides that, I'm going to make my cloud strategic as AWS, IBM Cloud, or Azure, one of those three. So they look for the SaaS or the products, IBM products there. So we're right in this challenge where we need to get our SaaS and products running in multiple clouds. Our standard platform for running containers is OpenShift. So OpenShift is available today in AWS as ROSA, Red Hat OpenShift container platform. It's available in Azure as ARO. In IBM Cloud, it's ROX, but underlying, it's all OpenShift. So that's where we get the benefit of containers running one way across different clouds in the Kubernetes platform of OpenShift. So once you have the OpenShift and the containers can be portable across, then it comes down to, can I set my routes well? Can I set my load balancer well? All of that comes into play as well. So that's how we standardize our products running across clouds with the containers to run in a consistent way.
So what you say is that there's multiple containers. It's not just Docker. Docker and OpenShift are competitors?
Docker goes with the containers, and containers runs inside the Kubernetes. Kubernetes is a way to orchestrate the containers. You can have multiple containers running in a Kubernetes environment, which is OpenShift for us.
Okay, so OpenShift is the orchestration tool?
Orchestration engine for
Okay.
containers, yes.
Okay.
So if you write your applications as containers and you run with OpenShift, then you have quite a good level of portability across clouds. There's more to it because then you're using underlying storage and VPCs that you have to manage. But your application is at least inside the Kubernetes.
So I'm going to ask one more question. And how does Terraform fit into this whole picture with OpenShift and Docker and the orchestration tools? Yeah.
I'll be happy to answer that because that's my day-to-day job. So where Terraform fits into is Terraform is a way for it's a scripting way. Terraform is a scripting technology. You use Terraform for provisioning the artifacts. So you can definitely use Terraform for provisioning the environment, which is provisioning your OpenShift, provisioning whichever Kubernetes environment you're using. You can use Terraforms to provision your environment where you can run your applications. So that is a way to provision the environment where you can run containers. So you can use Terraform to provision VPCs, storage, OpenShift, and then you can have a pipeline to run your application in that environment. Okay. So it comes together as a solution rather than competing with each other.
So what you're saying is I could use Terraform to work with OpenShift to provision onto all three clouds, onto Azure, AWS, or IBM's?
Yes, you can use Terraform, and there are Terraform providers available that you can use.
And I wouldn't have to change any of the APIs?
So under the line, so I mentioned earlier, every cloud is different.
Yeah.
So the way the APIs to provision the storage, the APIs to provision VPCs are different across. But when it comes to in your Terraform, you'll have to use different APIs to provision. But when it comes to the Kubernetes platform, which is OCP, then you can get consistent APIs.
Okay.
But you need more than just the Kubernetes environment to run your applications. There's storage, networking, and others. Yeah.
This discussion just highlights how complicated these considerations are.
So I guess this goes into the next question, which is, what about the cost and what strategies can be employed to optimize the spending? Like,
so
I can. Yep.
Yeah. So with regard to data, there are two factors here, major factors. So all the major data platforms now have some capability to interact with data across clouds. And some of them can also interact with data on-prem. And they all use some form of data virtualization where someone behind the scenes has done the setup to say that, well, this table of customers is in AWS, and this table of products is in Google Cloud, and this table of prices is in the IBM Cloud. And if you set it up right, you can bring them all together or have portions of them come together when queries are run, wherever the query is run. So you can have all the magic happen. The cost considerations, though, are first, in general, cloud providers don't charge you when you move data into their cloud, but they do charge you when you move data out of their cloud. Those are
egress
called
costs.
egress charges.
Egress charges.
Egress charges can get to be sizable if the interactions across clouds are frequent, and particularly if the data volumes involved are large. So egress charges are a consideration. Yeah. Another consideration is all queries and all databases are not the same. There are little queries and big queries. There are little databases and big databases, and there are simple queries and complicated queries. And if you run many queries, then the efficiency with which these queries run becomes a cost consideration. If the queries are complex, then the amount of processing and data movement turns into a major cost consideration. And the system which plans and carries out the queries can be very smart about these complications or very stupid. And often to the customer, it's not obvious. So, for example, some products are very popular, but they're used mostly in a kind of commodity space where there are lots of people use them happily, but they're not doing a lot of heavy work. And those products can get expensive when used on a large scale. Other products are engineered for large scale use, and they continue to be efficient even at large scales. It's kind of like, oh, I don't know, if you had an enormous amount of freight to move, you could move it by making arrangements with 1 million captains of small boats, or you could make one arrangement with one container ship. And if you have an awful lot of stuff to move, you ought to go to the container ship. So, the thing about data across clouds, it kind of amplifies all the performance and cost issues that exist when there's high complexity or large scale.
That's the only other thing I would add is the data egress cost is a big concern always. The second one I would add is the right sizing the environment that you have, be it VMs, be it Kubernetes environment, storage. Right sizing it matters because that's what the elasticity says. You're using it every day. It's pay what you pay for what you're using. Yes. It's a different story when you're in a private data centers and you've bought all the hardwares, and if you've bought it, you've already paid for it, so it's sitting there. But in the cloud, it's elasticity. So when you're not using it and you right size your VMs from large VM to small VM, you save the cost. So keeping that manually is a hard job. So having a good tool to continuously monitor the usage, mapping it to the cost, and mapping it to discounts and other pricing plan is what's required in this multi-cloud environment to ensure you just let go what you're not using and you pay for only what you need, and you scale it up when you need to scale up, scale down when you need to scale down.
So that's very interesting because as a startup, one of the challenges that I faced is cost of hosting.
Yes.
It's something that it really frustrates me because we get offered these free services from AWS and say, oh, you can use our services, build on our platform. Azure comes in and they sell us the same story. They're like, oh, we'll give you all this. And, for the most part, Azure has been fantastic. But I always get surprised with AWS. And sometimes these surprises are so big that it hurts my payroll because all of a sudden my account gets debited for $2,000 because of some surprise fee of some stupid server that was running. And I'm like, WTF.
Yeah.
So,
and that doesn't help. However many times you say it doesn't help.
And it's actually very painful, and it doesn't help because I am a startup, and I get sold on these services. But when I adopt these services, it makes me very angry.
Yeah.
And I always want to go back to bare metal, and I'm like, let me just go set up my own server because maybe I'll spend $600 here or $1,000 there, and maybe I might have to maintain it myself. But I'm not going to have these surprise costs. And I think some other founder, or I think he was the CEO of, I don't know if it was...
Dropbox?
It was one of these companies. He came up with a particular Basecamp, the guy from Basecamp, 33 Signals or something. Anyway, he did an experiment where he bought a bare metal server and his cost went down by almost, I forget what it was like, you're spending almost $2,000 a year compared to $24,000 a year.
And there's a few of these repatriation stories.
Yeah.
And I look at that and I think to myself, that actually like, I mean, going back, you go back, what, maybe 15 years, 20 years. That's what people did. There was no cloud, right? I think Rackspace tried to start up with the cloud, but you go and you go to your co-location at Rackspace and you'd have like a really powerful machine there that had your databases and all your
Yeah.
different servers. And it was really simple, right?
Here- yeah.
Sorry.
Here's what I think about it.
Yeah.
So it's not that we cannot do it in the data center. It's the pace of evolution
Right.
and the pace of rise in the business and what the COVID did to us. So if we think about Zoom calls and how people are doing the meetings these days, how people are working these days, that all leads to cloud methodology of doing stuff. So we can start small in the data center. This is, everybody is allowed to have their opinion for the future. This is what I think, is when you're starting small, it works out. But and that should be true for everybody. Your business grows. You want to experiment more. Your services are getting requested by globally from everywhere. When it comes to that challenge, then it's either you grow your own data center and have multiple data centers, private one in a lot of different facilities across the globe, or you resort to cloud. It's one of those things you have to pick. Even if you do it in your own data centers, so whoever is setting up has to spend the skills and the resources and the facility cost, scale up. That challenge comes in. What's going to happen in future, everybody has the reserve to state, but I think that will be the trade-off to make as to, yeah, I can do it in my data center. If my business grows, then am I going to have multiple data centers across the globe? Or I can resort to cloud with a very strong control of how I'm spending on it.
So I think what you're saying is if you're a startup, you should probably start small and maybe having your own
Doesn't hurt, yeah.
your own data center.
Or you start in a cloud and be very controlled what you're spending.
Yeah, there's another answer to this. There's a discipline which is
Yes.
developed called FinOps
Yep.
for financially managing cloud operations. And the idea is it involves collaboration in a company between finance, IT or engineering, and the business. And the issue is actually, in most companies, in some companies, it's a matter of they want to reduce cost, and how do they bring that about?
Yep.
But in a lot of companies, the issue is to align cost with value. So it might be that you're spending more on cloud, but you're making more money. That might be
Exactly.
okay.
Right.
It's when you're spending more and not making more money, that's not okay.
So we need to get our revenue up, is what you're saying.
Well, you may also need to manage your cloud cost.
Yeah.
And, sometimes very simple techniques have a big impact. Like people make mistakes, they leave servers running in the cloud.
Exactly, yeah. Right
I
sizing
mean,
it.
During COVID, I had an engineer who someone in his family died. He went off to a foreign country for a month to deal with it, understandably. But he left a few servers running, and we got a $10,000 bill that month. So, you need enough controls and visibility to be able to prevent errors like that, and also to be able to, when you get a bill that's bigger than you want to be able to say, well, what can I change, and what impact will that have?
Delete, delete, delete.
Well, sometimes you can't just delete. You have to put
Yeah.
some thought. You have to figure it out, and it's hard because if you have a big cloud bill, you have a big number, and you have 1 million line items,
Yeah.
and they're microcharges. So it's a problem in data analysis to understand and be able to
Yeah.
pull the levers. So that's this FinOps thing.
FinOps. That's interesting.
So I'll just add one more thing to it. It's I work at IBM, and it's a big company. That's one of the focus we have. It's all about getting the visibility, and that should be everybody. It doesn't matter which company we're working on. Visibility, observe what's getting spent, and have the right tool for it. Manually is not going to work just because of the example that you gave, Richard. So having control, full visibility of what you're using and how it's getting used, and then observing it and controlling it with proper ways of resizing, scaling down, scaling up. We use Aptio for Cloudability, for example. Cloudability gives full view of what the cost is, what the discounts are, what you're using, and how you can control the sizings and all.
Is that like an extra cost, or is that a product from IBM?
It is a product. There are actually two products that we use. It's from IBM. One is called Turbonomic. Turbonomic helps you right size. So it gets all the data and helps you figure out, oh, you're using VM of size extra large. You can do it with a smaller size, and that's the visibility you get. But of course, the SRE and the developer need to get involved to make sure that any of the transactions are not going to get impacted if I small size the VM. And Cloudability helps you with the get full observability of how much you're spending, and then take actions on it as well. But there are a lot of other FinOps. FinOps is the new
term.
New term, yeah.
So Turbonomic, does that work with Terraform? Turbonomic?
So Terraform is all about provisioning.
Right.
And once it's provisioned, it's your assets that are running like VMs, Kubernetes, storage. Now you can monitor those with Turbonomic and see if the traffic coming in smaller or larger, and you can reduce the size or not reduce size. Terraform work is done when it's provisioned.
Part of the CI/CD process, right?
Yeah, CI/CD,
Okay.
you provisioned it,
Okay.
now it's running, then you can get all the data of running environment into Turbonomic and do your analysis.
Does Turbonomics help to reduce the size during my Terraform deployment?
I'm responsible for SaaS in multiple clouds. Turbonomic does help with that, but it's up to the SRE. So sometimes for things like reducing the size, so that's called vertical scaling. We're not comfortable reducing the size as per what Turbonomic tells us. You could do like a full automated action. We're not comfortable. So we put SRE in place to understand, yes, it makes sense to reduce the size of the VM, and it's not going to impact any of the traffics. Otherwise, if on the reverse, if there is an action that requires you to increase the size, that's okay. So you can do some automation there, but it depends on how comfortable your SRE is with it.
So as a startup, what
Yeah.
you're saying to me is that I should implement FinOps by using Turbonomics.
You could use Turbonomic. There are several
Yeah.
tools out
But
there.
I must be
You
using
must
something
have
like that, because that's how I won't get any of these surprise costs, right?
I think that's what we both are saying, that
Okay.
there is egress cost. If anytime you've set up a pipeline between two clouds and start getting the data sent across, you'll be surprised. And if you're provisioning something and you're not even keeping track of it, you'll be surprised. So as a startup, when you start the innovation, FinOps should be part of your strategy. So.
Okay. I think that's some wise words there.
Okay. Thank you. I'll take it.
I don't know how we're doing for time.
This is an interesting topic, so there's a lot to discuss.
I think we have 12 more minutes.
Oh, we have 12 more minutes.
Okay.
So maybe we can take some questions from the audience, if anybody has any questions.
Actually, I want to bring up something that I thought was interesting. We just announced a couple of days ago, and I didn't think I'd ever hear an announcement like this, but Google and Oracle
Yeah.
have just announced a joint project or service where Google customers operating in the Google Cloud can seamlessly use the Oracle database operating in the Oracle Cloud. So, here's to cloud providers. The clouds were initially just separate universes, right?
Yep.
And IBM is doing some of this too, I know.
Yeah, yep.
You
But
might
you're
want to
right.
talk about that, but, you know, so there's now a deal between Google and Oracle. There's a deal between Oracle and Microsoft. And there are deals between IBM and.
And AWS, so we announced the partnership with AWS. So our SaaS is available in AWS. To Richard's point, be- all these clouds were so siloed and independent. Now they've realized what clients are doing, so they are actually starting to shake hands. IBM has a partnership with AWS to get our SaaS running in AWS cloud as part of that partnership. There's also partnership happening with Azure as well. So the people, clouds are realizing.
So,
yeah?
so you're saying that I would be able to run Azure workloads within IBM's environment?
Right now, the partnership that I'm aware of, that I'm working on to get, and it was announced at Think, so I'm now open to say that, our workloads or applications will be available in Azure cloud,
Oh,
IBM.
IBM will be available
Yes,
in Azure. Okay.
Azure. Reverse, I don't know the answer to that, so I wouldn't claim anything yet. But there are handshakes happening like this.
So that should reduce the egress costs.
Well, in the Oracle case, it does actually, because they've set it up so there are not egress costs.
Okay.
But I don't know.
I cannot comment on the other,
Yeah.
on the IBM side for that.
Well, that's those are huge steps, I guess. It's,
You were asking for questions from the,
Yes.
yeah. The audience have any questions? Yeah.
I can tell you what we're doing. We run our SaaS and software on OpenShift. Red Hat and IBM is one company. IBM had acquired Red Hat a few years back. So OpenShift is the Kubernetes platform that we use. So as I was mentioning with the partnership with AWS or even Azure, we are running our SaaS on OpenShift, which is called Managed OpenShift in AWS, which is ROSA. In Azure, it's called ARO. That gives us that portability. We know what to expect inside the OpenShift environment. So that takes us that, whatever percentage of headache away of multi-cloud. So we use open, and when our software is running on-prem in private data centers, it is running on OpenShift, which is client managed. So that's how we do it. Now, there are, like for example, if you look at AWS, they have their own Kubernetes called AKS, and Azure has EKS, so there's different flavors available, but those two flavors do not have same level of APIs or same level, so you'll have to worry about the portability if you're taking your containers to run in one AKS versus EKS. So that's what we do. Yep. We can connect offline too. Yeah.
amazing shout out for you can't, people normally don't have a problem hearing me. You can't hear me? You wouldn't have brought it? Okay, thank you, Donald. I'm sorry. But I think that you all bringing attention to that, I just don't want that to fall on deaf ears, because I think it saves a lot of companies. You mentioned a lot of your frustrations, Tyrone, and I think that that is common for a lot of companies, not just startups, but for large enterprises. I'm with FedEx, so we go through the same exact things.
Yeah.
Everything that we're saying right here is a priority, as well as my small external customers that I consult with. The micro companies, mom and pop shops, they go through the same exact thing when you start talking about cloud space, when you start talking about scaling in that space. FinOps was not a part of that conversation. Getting finance and business and the engineering or the IT teams together to be sure that you're monitoring the usage, if there's leakage, any of that stuff, I think is so very vital and important for the success of most companies. So kudos to you all for being able to facilitate such a healthy conversation around it.
I think that's a great comment.
Yeah, I think you need to come and join us.
I want to add a couple of things.
Yeah.
I want to add a couple of points. So one thing is, most executives, when they planned their company going to the cloud, what they expected was they would save money, right? And in fact, they may be saving kind of the unit costs are lower typically than what they were spending before. And there are many costs that tend to be lost in the thinking that have been eliminated. So like they're not having to build buildings, they're not having to staff operations, they're not having to pay for air conditioning, electricity. Those things, those savings tend to be forgotten, but they just, what's visible as the operation grows is that growing cloud bill. So it's an almost universal problem, like you say. The other thing is, just as everything's a little different, like if you talk about containers or data, everything's a little different from cloud to cloud. The cloud bills are different too.
Yes.
And there's actually now a standard for representing data in a cloud bill, which is slowly being adopted across the industry, so that companies will be able to create tools to analyze cloud spend across clouds, which is what bigger companies will have to do.
You're absolutely right. I'll add just one thing. If you're in the space of development, you might have heard about, the shift left. The DevOps came in. And then it was DevSecOps to bring dev, and I see your head shaking, development, operations, security coming together. Shift that left, DevSecOps. I do believe there is a future where it'll be DevSec, FinOps, because financial has to shift left. It cannot be an afterthought. We are not using that terminology today, but I think soon it'll be DevSec,
What does
FinOps.
shift left mean?
Shift left?
Shift left means, when you start development, left means towards the development side. When you start the development, then you have to worry about how it's going to get operated. That was DevOps coming together. Now, with the cloud, as we were talking earlier, the security is also a concern. So you have to think about security when you are creating the product, about data privacy, about compliance. So that becomes, when you're developing, think of development, security, and how you'll operate it. The one that we're just talking about is financial ops, which is as you're developing, as you're doing experiments, as you're starting your startup, you have to worry about how you're developing it, making sure it's going to be secure, making sure it is operatable, and making sure you're thinking of financials as well. So that's shift left. That's what it means. And start from the beginning. Don't keep it for the right-hand side, to your point.
Yeah, and another aspect of that is when in many systems on-prem, as the demands grew, we grew into performance problems.
Yeah.
Because the systems had a fixed capacity. So as it builds up, you run out of resources. In the cloud, you never run out of resources. So what were performance problems on-prem often turn into cost problems in the cloud. You grow into cost problems. And that's, another dimension of this.
Yeah.
It's not throw more metal at it, it's throw more money at it.
Yeah, right, that's right, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think
12,
that's it.
14.
We have 1 minute.
One more question? Is that a question? Okay.
I'm scratching his head.
Yeah.
So I do have a question more about companies that, or maybe it's more so a lot of the smaller companies, but having a problem with getting that data to the edge when you start talking about cloud, right? Trying to hit data centers across the country or across the pond. Have you all had struggles with that, and what are some of the ways that you may have overcome that? And I understand quickly because you only have a minute, but we'd love to hear your thoughts on it.
Yeah, I actually personally I was working on a big insurance company 2 years ago where we were moving data from the US into Canada and then into the UK because it was a big insurance company and we needed to bring in data from, I don't think I can tell you exact companies that we were bringing the data in from. So there's, say, 2 large insurance companies in the US. We're bringing in the actuarial data into Canada, processing that data on an Azure cloud. We're bringing it in from an AWS cloud in the US, processing it in Azure, and then moving it across to a European Azure environment, doing further analysis and processing there, and then bringing that data back into Canada.
Right.
But yeah, that's most of the problems that we faced was more on a regulatory standpoint because if you're in the insurance space, you know that
Yep.
there's laws that exist that says that your data has to be kept within your country,
Sovereignty, yeah.
and you could be breaking laws if you don't do that, and especially in the U.S. because the U.S. it became a little bit more paranoid because some of the data that some of the companies were doing was related to, I guess,
People data?
people in certain industries that were
Okay.
very touchy, and
We call it sensitive data.
sensitive data, right? And we could only take certain parts of that to Canada and the UK. So sorry, but I don't know if that answered your question.
Kind of. I was just more so talking. Maybe it's more
Well,
platform.
I'm sorry, not to cut you off.
You
I don't
are
want
though.
you
'Cause
guys
it
to
was
get-
good. It was a good question. I'm
We
kidding. I'm
have
kidding. I'm
so
just
much
kidding.
more
We just got
information
started,
to
I guess.
share, right? So hopefully during the break, you guys will be able to engage and talk about that more in detail.